It's this book that set me free. This book is really a rectification, saying, it's about parents. It's about parents who are unempathetic. It's about parents that don't know how to deal with their emotions. It's about parents who unawarely, unconsciously neglect the emotional needs of their children because they're emotionally immature. And this this is a real thing. It's something like everybody I speak to deals with. Like we all had those practical parents that gave us the physical needs. In the end, we experienced some sort of neglect, and one more than the other. But the good news is that it's not you. You are still very normal. Like you were born perfect. You were born, let's say, perfect to God's image and without any, yeah, real, let's say, mental faults. Because as a baby, you're this joyous creature, like most babies are. And then along the way of growing up, you get neglected, and that's not you. And those neglect patterns, they create a lot of self-doubt. And once I read this book, I got free of the self-doubt because it's all created by this confusion. And those emotionally immature parents make us feel so confused because all the time we're like, hey, I'm feeling a feeling, and they are denying my feelings. And once I go to my mother and say, hey, I got bullied in gym class, and when she says, you're overreacting, when she says, it happened to me too, when she says, it shouldn't bother you that much, she totally ignores the depth and the pain that I'm having. If she's ignoring the reality of my pain in that moment, it's apathy, but it's like this clear lack of empathy, of being able to empathize, of um, empathize feeling into the emotion, right? Literally, empathy is feeling into something, into a feeling. So in this case, we see in the book that these parents, they actually have all this um, typical behavior, like being absolutely logical about things, making important things sound um, little, denying the importance of a painful event, um, having very short-sighted views on the future. And I'm gonna take a break to look at my list. So our emotional parents, they're very loving creatures that are actually inside very anxious and insecure. And because they are anxious, they just don't know what to do with a child in distress. So when I come to my parents, especially unexpectedly, and it was when I was younger, I tell them about the situation. They try to revise my action. They say you should have slapped that guy, or no, no physical attacks. But I got into a fight with a guy in a discotheque who was bullying me a lot, like on a weekly basis. But in the end, the fight really became physical, and yeah, it was one of the worst experiences of my life because I was hit to the floor, and soon we were separated, and well, the damage was more emotional than physical. But my dad, in his review, told me, "You should have punched that guy in the balls." So he suggested I should have addressed it differently, still physically. But yeah, what I actually did is because I was called a hooker by this former classmate who was um, frustrated because he seemed to like me and we were hanging out, but I wasn't seeing him as a potential boyfriend. And when he got so confused about it, he started calling me a hooker every weekend we saw or when I passed him in the bar. And I might have also accidentally kissed him because I was 16 and I wasn't that aware of leading people on or of being unclear and hurting people by this confusion that I created. So in the end, there was a fight because I slapped him in the face and he slapped me in return. And we were both on the floor. And a couple months later, the police called my house, called my mother. And obviously, my parents didn't know, well, didn't handle it very well. And it was my mother who, um, very hasty, I guess, took me to the police station just the same afternoon. And imagine when you get a call and you're a parent, yes, you want to solve it. And maybe you want to solve it too quickly. And maybe you don't want to wait for your husband to join you. So my mother and I went to the police station. But once we returned, or it was the next day, but my dad said you should have punched him in the balls. And that is typical of emotionally immature parents, that they try to revise the situation or they try to tell you that there has been a different solution and that you could have um, handled it better. And my mother did the same thing. Someday I returned from church and I told her I went to church and things didn't work out. I went to the same church actually. My dad was visiting, and although my dad is very social person in church, he focuses a lot on his duties and less on my presence as a daughter, also visiting that church. And once I returned, very disappointed because I had needed a conversation with my dad, I turned to my mother, who told me right in the face, like, why are you even going to that church? Meaning, like, you should like save yourself from disappointment and just not go to that church anymore. And this is just a typical illogical approach to to discussing an event, to treating it with logic instead of feeling a feeling. You know, I am disappointed. I need some reassurance. I need some encouragement. I need someone to name my feelings. I need someone to empathize at that moment and to not say that I was wrong, because once I'm vulnerable saying I had a very painful experience, I don't want to hear you were wrong, you shouldn't have gone there. No, I don't want to have my pain doubled. And this is such a practical approach that a lot of those emotional immature people do. They tend to look at it the logic way, and it's so painful. They just ignore, they just don't see the hurt. They don't see how to address the hurt and how to um, calm my emotions. They just completely ignore the emotional side of an issue. And, you know, in this book, I know it's because they are anxious, they are insecure, they don't know any better. And really, when people are pretty old, all right, everybody can change. But emotionally immature people, they're not likely to change. And in this book, I realized that I need to give up on some of the goals and that I need to set boundaries. So that's what Gibson also says. Take the lead and set clear boundaries. And those are boundaries like I want to see my parents for 10 minutes. If I go eat with them, I might only join for dessert. I want to see my parents once every 2 weeks. When I visit my parents, I don't speak about certain topics. I avoid certain topics. I avoid responding to certain questions or um, answering certain questions. I know what I want to speak about and I know what I don't want to speak about. And I know when I will help them. And I know that with a lot of issues, I cannot help them. And when they need or try to say that I'm the only one that can help them, I will say, well, you should ask someone else. And it's not my job to know who that other person is. And this to me gave me the space. I didn't want to be the first person for the hospital phone calls, actually. And my mother automatically pointed her finger at me, like I am her most important person in the world, but she's not treating me likewise. And so my aunt is that number one person. And I visit my mother, yeah, consistently. I try to spread out those visits, and that's a boundary I'm working on. But right now, I need to mourn a bit. I need to mourn all the pain that is from like therapy people like John, who has been following or having therapy of this author, and he tells his story, and all those people tell the same thing. They tell how confused they get of those parents, and they start to doubt themselves. And this has been a great issue, overcoming self-doubt. And I think I'm really grateful for the work of Gibson, all the people that shared their stories with Nancy Gibson. And that helped me see, that the world needs emotionally mature people. We need to all work on empathy as soon as possible because everything is figure outable and we can all learn to have loving relationships. So, guys, thank you for watching and let's keep connecting. You're enough. Also, especially when you doubt yourself, you're enough.